This is Bleav in Buckeyes. I'm Brian Browning with All-American cornerback Chimdi Chekwa. We got I was about to say, man, we got a great show for you guys, but I don't know, news been slow for a week, man. Right?
News been slow, but there's always news. There's always stuff out there, man.
There's always news. And I guess that's the thing about being Buckeye Nation. Something is always going on. Right now, we sit a week away from spring ball. As we know, spring ball is going to look a little bit different this year, right? I mean, they already kind of put the news out there. It's not a spring game. It's a spring showcase, whatever that means. What's your thoughts, I guess, a week out from spring ball? Look like the weather's turning on Ohio State. It might actually be spring around here when things kick off. What's your thoughts on that going into it, Chum?
Yeah, you know how the weather is. It's gonna give us a little a little preview, a little trailer of what spring feels like, and then we're gonna get another cold week. But spring ball, it's a showcase. It's tough. They just come off a national championship run. Got to get right back into it. Like not a ton of time to take a break, decompress, and kind of get ready for spring. Where you typically have a good amount of months. Not so much this year, but. I mean, I'm not all educated on the details of what they're actually going to do. I know they have a spring showcase, but I will say this team loses a lot of veteran players, a lot of young guys. While they participated in this championship run, they didn't get a ton of time playing. And some of the older guys, you would assume that they're going to take some, a little bit. It's going to be a little bit lighter for them. Guys like Sonny Styles and others, Caleb Downs, like they participate in the spring, but they're not competing for anything. But there's a lot of positions where you have real competition. Like a running back. Coach Lachlan was everybody's talking about Peoples. We're going to compete. We're going to figure out who the guy is. At quarterback, they mentioned, the quarterbacks out there. He wants to see a guy who's a leader, wants to see a guy who's tough, a guy who can command the huddle, et cetera. So, this spring is going to be important to be able to find guys who separate themselves a little bit from the pack and are able to carry that momentum into fall camp.
Yeah, and I guess that's very important. I mean, that's the point of spring ball, right? I think I was watching Urban Coach Meyer on his podcast. He just kind of talk about, if you're been a 1-year starter, then you probably do this amount in the spring. If you're a 2-year starter, you won't get hit in the spring and all that thing of that nature. But like you said, there's a lot of guys that does not check any of those boxes. A lot of competition, and that's what the spring is for, right? You're done with the season, right? So it's a little bit more time to kind of coach in. You kind of reset your install. You're going basic plays here in the spring, right? You're not getting very exotic. You're not game planning for anyone. You're just kind of going over your bread and butter things, and you want to see your young guys show that they are capable of learning, going out and just executing time and time again. And so a coach can get comfortable with you, right? So now when the fall hits, we know that we could game plan. We can put this guy in this type of position because we know he's capable of doing the basics. So now we can throw a little bit more at him. The guys went to the press conference, right? And Coach Dave got this, I don't know, for every reason, they did the press conferences, but wherever he kind of wanted to break down a little bit the Patricia hire. I know he kind of hit on some things that we talked about, but what was your thoughts on his conversation around Matt Patricia and what he brings to the table and eventually why they go with him in that role?
Yeah, so we saw the clips. I think somebody asked him, I think this might be his first time kind of facing the local media since making all these hires and decisions. That's the other thing about spring ball. You got a lot of new coaches. I mean, these guys have been coaching football, but they haven't been coaching at Ohio State. So just getting acclimated to the new coaching. If there's any new types of installs, new defenses, the spring is going to be the start to doing that. Then you got Hartline on the other side on offense, who technically is going to be his first time calling the plays for the year. So his ability to get in there in spring and start to establish himself as offensive coordinator. But I thought what they said about Matt Patricia hire was what we talked about, right? Yeah. Like he's making a decision to hire a defensive coordinator, but he wants to keep everything else intact. Well, how do you do that? Well, one, you got to get a guy who is experienced enough to be able to be more qualified than the guys you already have, who are guys who are well qualified. And he talked about keeping that continuity. He also talked about Matt Patricia's ability to, kind of create a defense that fits the players and put the players in the best position possible. And I think that was probably one of the most important things in this specific hire. is that Matt Patricia, if you watch the Patriots defense over however many years, they're one of the defenses that have been able to tweak their defense from week to week to put their guys in the best position possible. I mean, they had a year in 2011. This was my rookie year where it seemed like their whole defense got hurt. They had offensive players playing defense. They had Julian Edelman, a receiver, playing defensive back. But they were able to kind of create a defense where they utilized their strengths. And then everything else, they just kind of figured out. So I think Matt Patricia's ability, one, he's a smart mind, but his ability to bring a defense that can do everything, right? And you'll see some 3-4, right? There's been a lot of talk about Larry Johnson's inability to be flexible and go 3-down linemen, et cetera. I think he's going to be open to what Matt Patricia brings because he's gonna bring that versatility in a way that best fits the guys that are on the defense. And the other thing I want to say is, guys like Caleb Downs are going to really benefit from this hire. Because if you look at the Patriots and how they use Patrick Chung, a safety who was he was a free safety, but he really was kind of a tweener between linebacker and safety. A guy who could come up and make the tackle, but he also can cover the bigger tight ends, et cetera. And that's what you have in Caleb Downs, is someone who last year allowed his defense to do so much because of his versatility. He could cover a lot of ground. He could come up and make the tackle. He could drop back and play free safety. He could cover tight ends. He could cover receivers. And Matt Patricia is going to really be beneficial to him. And then the other guy who's going to really benefit is C.J. Hicks. Because now you bring that edge-type player into this defense who is a linebacker / defensive end and can rush a passer. And the way they're going to use C.J. Hicks, we've been talking about this for how long we been talking about
years.
this?
How long since he's been at Buckeye? I don't know. We've been talking about this for a while. Wow, yeah. But yeah, pin him on the edge. That come down to, I mean, it's officially that he's going to make that transition to be more of an edge guy. And I think that might be the best thing for him and his ability, especially get on the field. Was this year 4, right? I mean,
yeah, this is year 4. And what's interesting, so I didn't follow recruiting as much when he was coming into Ohio State, so I didn't know a lot about C.J. Hicks until after he got to Ohio State. But when I read Twitter and looked at the fans talk about him and all the beat writers talk about him, I went back and looked at his high school highlights. And I know it's a highlight tape, right? So you show the best plays, and the best plays are always when guys hitting the quarterback in the backfield and making a tackle in the backfield. But most of his highlights were him downhill blowing stuff up, right? And then when you go watch practice, when he really flashes, is him downhill on a blitz, going after the quarterback, going and hitting the running back. And I'm just looking at him, man, size, speed, athleticism. This is just simplified for the guy and let him go rush the passer. So I'm happy that finally and I think the Matt Patricia hire is part of it. Like we feel comfortable, and I mean you have some defensive ends who went on to the NFL, but we feel comfortable utilizing this guy in a way that can maximize his strengths. We're going to start with putting him at defensive end and just being able to rush, because that's the one thing he hasn't done yet. But I think they likely utilize him as an edge type player who could probably do multiple things, but keep it simplified enough that he can do everything fast. And I think that's what he needs to really blossom with the type of talent he is.
Yeah. Let me throw this at you. So obviously, a handful of weeks ago, we had the national champion, Denzel Burke, on the podcast, and he kind of went into how, after the Oregon game, as a defense, things got a little bit more simpler, right? They kind of cut back on some of the calls and some of the things they're doing because essentially they wasn't doing it right.
Yeah.
So I'm playing a little bit of a, I guess, with devil's advocate here, right? To the Patricia hire, just so we can have a conversation. I like the hire. I'm not going that way. But what do you say about him being an NFL guy and him coming into a playbook where that's just like the Bible, right? And he has his defensive Bible where he writes everything down. What do you say about that and him coming in with that, essentially that NFL mindset, which the game is different? I think I watched Pat Shurmur do an interview once, and Pat Shurmur's a long NFL guy, former head coach of the NFL, but now he coaches at Colorado with Deion. And you understand how it's much different. It's much simpler, right? Because teams don't do so much. So my game plan is a little bit more condensed. I can kind of get right to it. What do you say about Matt Patricia coming in and maybe overdoing and bringing too many things to the table, which may hinder our guys and them having that ability to, like you say, like for CJ Hicks, to play fast and be able to just kind of go out there and not think and play football and make plays.
So it's interesting. Like they're talking to the coaches now. They're coming out talking to the media, and he talked about his approach and really tailoring the defense to the players, right? So I think if he stays true to that approach, and that's not just an approach that he has to stay true to, that's an approach that Ryan Day, based on his experience, including last year, is going to likely hold him to, right? I think based on his approach, that won't be as much of an issue. Now, I think there's an adjustment because you're still not talking about NFL players. You're talking about college football players who still go to class.
Yeah,
man, they still go to class. They still have exams. They still do all those things that we don't really talk about when we talk about college football athletes, right? So the time is even more limited. But I think Matt Patricia, and I mentioned it before, but I think he understands how to lean on the guys who can handle it. That's why a guy like Caleb Downs is so important for this defense, and why he's going to be so useful for Matt Patricia. Because his versatility, his ability to do so much, you tailor the complex things to guys like that who make everybody else right. And then you take a guy like CJ Hicks and you make him just a disruptor, right? You blow it up, and sometimes maybe you're supposed to knife in and you go out, right? But a guy like Caleb Downs is going to see that and be able to make it right. So I'm confident in Matt Patricia's ability to see what he has, understand what he has, and create the best scheme that's versatile enough to put the best guys in the best position. Now, I still think there is going to be an adjustment coming from the NFL to college, where guys just don't have the same amount of time to commit to learning the scheme and all those things. So he is going to have to figure out, okay, what works for this specific type of atmosphere. The only other thing that I would say is let's listen to him talk in the press conference and how college football has changed because now they have a playoff. And, in the NFL, they used to be like, their approach was get into the playoffs, get yourself a good position in the playoffs, and then go on a run. The only thing that's different here is there's a Michigan game right before, any type of postseason play. So there's a concern. Dane is in the back of my what Dane talks about is in the back of my head. Like, this shift to playoffs can start to devalue a little bit of the regular season in terms of your approach. And you bring in an NFL guy who's used to gearing up for the playoffs. It's just, and this is where the culture is important, because you need to make sure that you're not just gearing up for the playoffs. You're gearing up. The playoffs start against that team up north. That's the first playoff game.
That's the first one. Right.
So that's going to be an adjustment as well.
Yeah, but I'm gonna throw one more thing at you. We were talking about this before the show, and I guess I was trying to pull it out you to say it, but I'm gonna say it for you. But we're Ohio State. We got good players all over the place, and I think we spoke about, like I say before the show, that sometimes we could be doing something that's not necessarily the best thing to do, but due to good players, it works, right? We run against Purdue. It got some flaws in it, but it worked. So it looked well. So if it's broke, put a quote on that, you don't fix it.
Right.
Then you get into some bigger competition. Things start to poke out, like you say, the Michigan game where you get into playoffs and you're playing against one of the top teams in the nation, the Georgia Bulldogs or something of that sort. Then things kind of show up, like, oh, well, maybe we're not very good at this scheme or at this defense or at this lineup, at this look. But we ran it anyway. That's something that Matt Patricia gonna have to, I guess. I don't know. There's no way to fix it now, but you just got to pay attention to it and make sure you correct it if it's there.
So let's think about the reported controversy or conflict between Larry Johnson and Nose. Nose came from the Big 12. Big 12 conference,
yeah, Big 12.
Yeah, it came from the Big 12.
Still exists. That still exists. That's still a thing. Yeah, Big 12.
Kind of the spread, throw the ball all over the place conference where the defense shifted to be able to account for that, that type of running gun offense. Larry Johnson has been in the Big 10.
Mm-hmm.
And what Larry Johnson understands is, all right, yeah, you may play 8 games with this, this spread offense or whatever. But at some point, you're going to line up against a Big Ten team like Michigan, even like Penn State, that's going to line up and try to run the ball at you, right? So if you think about what the conflict probably was, no, it's like this, this is my defense that's worked. It's worked for me for however many years. And, when we do it against teams, it works. But when you line up against a Georgia, when you line up against a Michigan, when you line up against certain teams, it may not work so much. So, that's something. And I think Matt Patricia would, he'd understand that.
Oh, yeah. If one thing the Patriots are going to do is stop the run.
Right, exactly.
They're going to stop the run. That's right, yeah.
But the adjustment for Matt Patricia, different than those coming from a different conference, for Matt Patricia is the importance of the game. Like, the game is important. Yeah, we want to go on a playoff run. Yeah, this past season, we lost to Michigan and still won the national championship, and we're all happy. But that's just not something that you can bake on every year. So I think that's going to be his biggest adjustment is, let's gear up for those big games during the season, even before we gear up for the playoffs.
Yeah. And one more thing out there on Coach Johnson. If anyone was wondering, I know he's getting up there in age. He has no plan. What he said, he had no plans to retire.
No plan.
GOAT Larry Johnson will be running the defensive line for the Ohio State for the foreseeable future. I guess, obviously, you got to take a thing with a grain of salt, right? Next week, he might feel different. But, man, I want to talk about some recruiting stuff, man. Obviously, a lot of it's funny, like the 25 class, or what is it? Technically was the 26th class. I don't know. I can't even keep up anymore. But a lot of those guys are on campus, right? They come in for essentially playoff practice, and now they're gearing up to get ready for their first spring. I want to talk about a couple of guys that's in high school still that's big to Ohio State, and some of the situations that are kind of going on, which is really, pretty much is really different right now, the world of recruiting and how things work. And the first one I want to talk about is our big-time receiver in the 26th class, which is being led by Chris Henry Jr. For those who don't know his story, he's playing high school ball in Cincinnati. Didn't say why, but he up and he moved to California. He now is at Mater Dei, who's one of who's basically a historic high school program who they go like 5-10 years in a row without losing games, things of that nature. But he with a program like that now. But it's kind of being brought up, kind of discussion, his recruiting, because obviously he's still committed to Ohio State.
Yeah.
But he just said his visit list, and he has, all the top teams in the nation he's going to visit. And I guess the one that's most concerning to me is Oregon. Oregon's on that list of the team he's visiting. And guys are starting to talk about the NIL, right? And how there's in certain states, like in California, you could start receiving funds in high school for NIL. And you got a team like Oregon, who we know, Ohio State too, but also a team like Oregon who's big in the NIL, who may start funneling him money now to kind of turn the wheels and maybe get him to switch on recruiting. What's your thoughts on that? And I guess it possibly happening. And is there anything we should be concerned about? What's your thoughts on that in general, I guess?
Yeah, if it's a recruit in the 2026 class is committed to Ohio State, you should be concerned. There's so much time in between now and signing day. And what's different, so for Jeremiah Smith, right, he was in Florida where NIL is not legal for high school students. With Chris Henry, he was in Ohio where NIL is not legal for high school students. He moved to California where you can do NIL as a high school kid. So, the way this word of NIL is governed or, regulated, it's just wide open. Mm-hmm. So a college could figure out a way to pay a kid while he's still in high school to start to funnel them towards their school. Now, the challenge is there may be no guarantees, even if you start paying him while he's in high school. But they could show goodwill in terms of getting him money early, which could, kind of lead him to want. Yeah, at the end of the day, incentives drive people's actions. Yeah. So there's, as a kid in high school with, some mentors, Pac-Man Jones has been in the NFL. I'm not, they're going to want what's best for him, but there's opportunity out there that didn't exist before that does now that he's in Cali. So, yeah, I think it's something to be concerned about. I think it's something to pay close attention to. And at the end of the day, you know, I like to say that one player doesn't make or break a team, right? But when we look at the impact that Jeremiah Smith has had at Ohio State, sometimes you want that one player.
Yeah, you want that one guy to be on your side. That's for sure. And obviously, like you say, as wide receiver, I'm an offensive lineman. Like, yeah, you need good wide receivers, but like, you know me, it's like, it's about, taking care of business, everybody executing, everyone can score a touchdown. But I mean, like you say, Jeremiah Smith is like this one of a kind, and you see, like, at the end of a season, especially with NILs in play, every year people going to take a shot at, what can they do? What can they how can they nab them? And then when it comes down to it, it's not a potential. It's not about, who's coaching them. It's about dollars, right?
Yeah.
About NIL green money and what can be presented him and influence a decision on that, man. But I guess real quick, I want to throw it to Brady Edmonds. He was on the podcast, Juck on Bucks. He was doing the podcast, and he was just kind of going over, he committed to Ohio State right after the Michigan loss. And he's another California guy. I know Chip was really big on him. Obviously, Chip is gone now, but he kind of was just saying, like, people was down on Coach Day. Everyone was calling for his job in the media. Everyone in the media was calling for his job. And once again, he's not here. He's already in California. We just kind of talk about how no matter what, he still wanted to be a Buckeye. I guess he got a picture when he was like a little boy in front of the sign. He's a 5-star quarterback. He wanted to be a Buckeye. Speak to that. Like, or what does Ohio State bring to the table that maybe some other schools just, they just don't have that, or to kind of bring a guy in just because of the logo, the name that's on front of the jersey, not the back of the jersey, and assisting to make a decision, even above maybe some NIL packages that's out there.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State's probably the biggest brand in college football, right? Like, and that brand has, I mean, it's wide ranging. Some kids, whether you're in California, I mean, we play with a guy, Grant Schwartz.
Mm-hmm.
His dad went to Ohio State, so like it doesn't matter where these kids are, they could grow up wanting to go and be a Buckeye. You talk about another kid from California, he could easily start getting NIL deals here and start looking elsewhere. And 2027 is still a long way away, right? So, I mean, things can change, but it's clear that he wants to be a Buckeye. And the reality is, those are the guys that you want to get, like, above all, right? You want to prioritize guys who really want to be a Buckeye, whether they're in state or out of state, honestly, because if they really want to play for Ohio State, with all of the potential distractions or all the potential monetary compensations that can, sway them to go elsewhere, you're most likely to keep those guys locked in and focused on coming to Ohio State. And the opportunity is great. You talk about long-term, lifetime opportunity beyond football compared to a lot of other universities. If a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old can see that long, which is hard to do, so I don't fault anybody, but if you can see that long ahead and you compare them against some other opportunities, the opportunity is great. I've been in the NFL locker rooms with other guys who said, man, I wish I went to a place like Ohio State. And these guys are in the NFL making $10 million. Like, what you talking about?
Yeah, bro? Right. I mean, but the opportunity is there. Obviously, we both chose to be Buckeyes before NIL, right? It was really about just the name on the front of the jersey and the opportunity you was giving yourself. And a certain time, that just doesn't change, right? Your program is doing X, Y, Z. Maybe there's a donor there that really wants you. But, overall, you want to win. You want to compete against the best. You want to give yourself that opportunity to say that you're the best. And Ohio State will always be a place that you could come and get that done. But, man, real quick, I want to shout out some of our Buckeyes that's on the professional. Well, not all professional, but shout out first off Justin Fields. Looks like he just signed a deal. He's moving to the Jets. So the Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson connection is back. And this time they'll be wearing, I guess, green and white, I guess.
Yeah, I'm a Jets fan. Look, listen, I'm a Texas fan. I'm a Jets fan. I'm a Raiders fan. All right, but I'm a Texas fan with C.J. Stroud, and I'm rooting for Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, probably my favorite Buckeye player all time. Probably my favorite Buckeye player all time. So Those two, I'm definitely gonna be tuning in. And then you had another Buckeye, who's on the move. Eddie George just got the head coaching job at Bowling Green. So he was at Tennessee State for how many years was that?
Man, I want to say it was about 5. I think they said like 19. I'm saying so about 4 or 5 seasons.
Did a great job at Tennessee State. Now he moves on to Bowling Green. He's back in Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's big, man. I think it's always nice to have first off a Buckeye great, and Eddie George coming back to Ohio. And I've been reading some articles about the situation. It looked like Coach Urban Meyer was big in assisting Bowling Green and kind of filtering guys. And it seems like he's the one that actually made the call to Coach George and say, hey, do you want this opportunity to come north and coach a Bowling Green team? Essentially, and obviously they need a pro. I feel like, don't quote me on this, but they're towards the bottom programs in college football when it comes to guys. They've been down there for a while. I know they've been pretty bad. So Coach Eddie George, he turned around that Tennessee State program. They had many loser seasons. He got them to the playoffs this year in their system. So obviously, I don't think he'll get Bowling Green into the playoffs, but he definitely could make them a competitive. Yeah. I guess I won't say
never say never.
But I don't know if he get them to the playoffs. But obviously, if you could get them to be competitive in the MAC, that'll open up some doors for you in college football for sure.
Listen, so Eddie George, he's on the list now. You know what that list is?
What's the list, Tim?
The list of former Buckeye players who could be the next Buckeye head coach. Now I'm not. Listen, I'm fully behind and support Ryan Day as long as he's here. But at some point, Ryan Day may want to move on and do something else. He may want to go to NFL. Whatever. If that was the case, I got this running list of former Buckeye players that could be tapped for the head coaching job at Ohio State.
Bro, you gotta go through the list, man. I want to hear this, man. What's the list?
So at the top of my list, right now, Marcus Freeman, our former teammate, Marcus Freeman.
He's
hot right now. He made it to the national championship, and he lost to the only team that he could lose to, and we could still love him, right? So had he beat Ohio State, we'll be some different feelings. But he did everything he can to get there, and then lost. So. Freeman at 1.
Yep.
And a guy who's sliding down the list. He was up at the top for me. He's sliding down the list is Luke Fickell.
Okay.
Luke Fickell. Probably third in number of starts as a player at Ohio State.
Something crazy like that. So nuts.
But he's at Wisconsin. He just got an extension at Wisconsin.
A
little puzzling to me to get that extension. I fully support Fickell. I think he's a great coach.
Yeah.
But he's got his work cut out for him at Wisconsin right now. Third on my list, Brian Hartline.
3?
Brian Hartline.
Not 1A? What are you talking about, man? Okay. All right, go ahead.
Brian Hartline jumps to 3, partly because he's already on the team. He's already here. He's a hot coach in college circles and NFL circles as a receiver coach. Now he makes the jump to offensive coordinator. And we assume Hartline's gonna have a good offense, right?
Yeah, we're gonna assume we have a really good offense. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
So similar to Urban Meyer leaving and Ryan Day getting promoted, if Ryan Day was to leave, just moving Hartline up and keeping everything intact seems like a real thing, something that could potentially happen, however many years down the road. So
yep.
Hartline at 3. Number 4,
have him higher on the list. I can't argue with about what have him higher on the list. But okay, go ahead.
He is high, but number 4, the guy we just talked about.
Okay.
Eddie George.
All right. Back in the Buckeye State coaching.
So depending on how he does at Bowling Green, right? He's got to, that's a big jump from Bowling Green to State, right? But it would have been an even bigger jump from Tennessee State, right? So he's in Ohio. He's talking. He's connecting with all the Ohio high school coaches, etc. And he's Eddie George.
He's Eddie George. Yeah, he's gonna do a good job. That's for sure.
And then my number 5. This guy doesn't even want the job. Vrabel.
Okay.
Vrabel was my number 5. Only because he doesn't want. I don't think he wants the job. I don't think he wants to coach in college. But if there was a void at Ohio State, and everything else he was trying to
call,
do,
right? He had to step in. He had to do it. He probably had to take it on.
So who am I missing? Who
you missing, man? You missing Who you missing? You missing Kenny G,
Kenny
right?
G.
He's doing some coaching, right? He's lighting up some things. You missing JT Barrett, right? He's a quarterback coach at the Chicago Bears.
Oh, I like that one.
Yeah, JT Barrett. That's a good one. Who else out there? Who you missing?
Coach Walton.
Coach Walton. Oh,
Coach
yeah,
Walton.
He's on the staff. Coach Walton.
OG Walton is on the staff. He's right there.
Staff. I'm sure he'll do a great job. He'll step into that role. I don't know, man. There's guys out there obviously that could get
James Laurinaitis is
another guy that's on the staff.
He's on the staff as well. So
yeah, that's another guy that's like, I don't know if he really want to do all that, but you know, if he was needed,
like you said, duty calls. I think he stepped into that position to make it happen.
Yeah, and then he hit a home run, and then we'll be talking about him as a great coach. We forget about his player days, like all that kind of stuff. But man, I don't know, man. But that's our show for this day. Obviously, next week. Spring ball will have kicked off, so we kind of give you what we're seeing there, and kind of trying to get understanding exactly what this is going to look like. Exactly what the guys are going to be going through this time, through their 15 weeks in the spring to practice. But please follow us: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just tune in, log on, follow us, rate us, man. Send some comments. We love the comments. We love talking to you guys. We really appreciate the support. And you just kind of stick with us in this off season as we gear up for the 25 season to defend our national championship against the nation. That's our show for today. We end our show always with a nice OH.
Ayo.
Go Bucks, and we'll see you guys soon.
Go Bucks.